Meat to Market has been a wonderful partnership, and it's been curriculum that's being developed over quite a period of time at this point, and we've been able to integrate meat processing and from different lenses of the work, from the processors, capacity development, and then the work of tribal producers in considering diversification to direct to market. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Olivia Tincani, who's going to give the overview of the session today. But I just want to say it's been really great to be partnering on these efforts, and we'll be rolling out a substantial curriculum as we move forward into 2023. So come on up, Olivia. How's it going? Thank you.
Thanks, y'all, for being here. I'm Olivia, and I am an independent educator and consultant. I teach business skills to farmers and ranchers, and I am proud to be the program curator for Meat to Market. I also am up here representing the Southwest Grass-Fed Livestock Alliance, which is IAC's partner in developing this curriculum. So Meat to Market is designed to be a series of live online webinars that will start in January of 2023 and go for over a year. And our goal is to teach business skills to those who are thinking about or already attempting to direct sell their meat. So livestock producers all throughout Indian country looking to get more out of their carcass by taking it all the way through. And we have designed a suite of courses that really touch every aspect of business operations in depth. And we decided to kick off this program here at the conference while we had you all as a captive audience. And we did 2 sessions yesterday, and this is our final one. And we're really excited to be able to bring something as dynamic as a butchery demo to the conference today. So information about Meat to Market can be found on the IAC website under the resources page. There is also a sign up in the back. I encourage you to put your name down if you would like to receive information about webinar registration and being involved in Meat to Market. There's also a little bit of information on the table about SWGLA, Southwest Grass-Fed Livestock Alliance, for those of you that are doing grass-fed production and also in the Southwest. We take a pretty lenient definition of the Southwest, so let's just call it West. And we also have a resources page. There's a lot of information on there relevant to this discussion today. And if you look on the back, there is also a diagram of a beef breakdown to help orient you as to what we are doing today. So just take a look at that. There's extras in the back, and there's 2 on each table for y'all to share, and feel free to take them home. So before I introduce our folks up here, I just wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit about what we're doing. Why are we gathering a bunch of producers for a butchery demo? So in my early years as a chef and a farmer and a food systems advocate, we noticed a major disconnect between essentially the supply chain connections, right? And a lack of empathy and understanding between producers and chefs and processors. So we started creating learning opportunities, much like this one, to bring those folks in the same room together and get to the heart of the missing link, which is really true knowledge on the part of both the chef and the producer about the inside of the animal. Right? Something that the processor is usually the person that knows about. And so in connecting the pathways between these 3 cogs in the meat supply chain, we felt and saw and are here today to inspire better collaboration. And that in turn, I think, allows for an expansion of markets available to producers. And obviously it betters the experience and the outcomes from processors and plants if there is true communication between the producer and the processor. And that really starts with knowing your own meat, right? And knowing your own meat first before you try to sell your meat. So we feel like it's an integral part of selling your meat is understanding what's going on inside, not just what comes out when you pick up your boxes. So today, at the kickoff of Meat to Market, alongside the MPPTA program here as part of our whole, we sort of put those 2 worlds together for the conference. We also
Okay.
partnered with an organization called the Good Meat Project, who has done a number of these sorts of trainings and educational opportunities. There are thought partners in this work, and we're here to invite an in-depth conversation between producer and processor and touch on some marketing and sales opportunities while we're at it, and ground that whole discussion in cultural identity and cultural significance. So that's what we're doing. Grab your resources if you're there, and a couple of shout outs. One is to Bunzel processors who donated most of our equipment here today, and Austin is over there in the corner if anybody wants to talk to Austin about supplies. Jayme can attest to the fact that he also purchases from them. And we feel very grateful for that support from Bunzel. And our meat is coming to you today from an American Indian Foods trademark producer out of Arizona, a fifth generation cattle ranching family called Bravo and Sons. They're on the Wallapai Reservation and got this meat to us today. Yep. And in case anybody's wondering, we are donating the meat after the fact to local tribal communities. So it's not going to waste at all. And with that, I'm going to pass over the mic to everyone who's up on the stage to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do and why they're here. So let's start with you, Meredith.
Hi, I'm Meredith Leigh. I am a former farmer and butcher. I had a butcher shop and a farm in North Carolina, Asheville area in the mountains. And I lost it in a big old divorce, but that's another story. And after that happened, decided to write a book because similar to Olivia, I saw a lot of disconnect. I had a butcher shop, but I saw the people walking in it still didn't really understand what we were doing, how to buy meat, other than like tenderloin, for example. And so I wrote a book called The Ethical Meat Handbook, which is really trying to elucidate for mostly consumers and chefs who at the time seemed to have the most flexibility in the supply chain, about like the 300,000 foot view on the supply chain, like what's actually going on from farm to plate. And first and foremost, stop placing so much responsibility on ranchers and farmers for fixing all of the systemic issues that are happening in the meat supply chain. And so since that book came out in 2015, I've just been sort of running around the world talking about meat and showing people how to butcher animals. And a second book I wrote in 2017 is called Pure Charcuterie, which is all about preserving meat. And just the connection between using an animal and honoring the entire carcass and actually preserving some of that we can't actually use the entire animal well unless we are re-enlivening some of the traditions of drying meats, smoking meats, fermenting meats, etc. So I'm here to just sort of facilitate today, but the stars of the show are Leigh and Jayme, so I'll let you guys intro yourselves. Jayme, you want to go? Leigh, you want to go?
Sure. Hi, my name is Leigh Meisel. I'm from Standing Rock Sioux Tribe of North Dakota. I currently live in Lawrence, Kansas, and I operate a small retail butcher shop there and a restaurant that utilizes whole animal butchery. We've been in business for about 8 years now, and we really focus on value-added cuts, sort of traditional seam cutting for different cuts. So when you walk into my shop, you might see different items that you wouldn't see at the grocery store. So we're trying to show you guys some of that stuff today.
Well, good morning. Thanks everyone for coming. It's an honor to be up here with these people. Jayme Murray, member of the Shiner Sioux Tribe. I'm a 6th generation cow-calf rancher. I am the CEO for the Cheyenne River Sioux Tribe Buffalo Authority Corporation. We own a processing plant in Mobridge, South Dakota called Westside Meats. And we also, our brand name for our buffalo is the Cheyenne River Buffalo Company. You guys had some skirt steaks and meatballs from us at the banquet meal, so hope you enjoyed those. My path to this field is probably a little different than everyone else. It's kind of a roundabout way I got here. Grew up butchering in my grandpa's little butcher shop. Learned to despise it as a child. butchering beef, butchering deer. Kind of came full circle, and I'm very interested in it again now. But spent about 20 years with the federal government. Tribe approached me looking for someone to run the buffalo program. So I had that opportunity, took it on. Things just kind of fell in order. We had the opportunity to buy this processing facility. We were looking for a way to add value to our buffalo, and it's just really taken off from there. So I think my perspective is probably producer / the marketing side of it, because primarily that's what I do. I'm not on the cutting floor. I'm not even in the butcher plant much, but I'm on the phone. I'm out here trying to promote our brand, and I think my knowledge lies more so in how to market some of this stuff. So I hope to be able to contribute here. Thank you.
Totally. So let's get going, huh? You guys ready? What is this, Leigh? Tell us what we're looking at.
So we're looking at a top butt. This is a full sirloin, top butt sirloin, bone in. This is what's been separated from the round. On one side here, you can see the end of the femur bone. This is a good break because you have this piece of bone that's still attached here, so you know that you're broke at the right spot. The final bit of the backbone on this side, and then there is a section of H-bone that lies in here. The way that this cattle was broken, if you notice on this side, what does that look like? Just that section. Porterhouse, I heard somebody say porterhouse. This is a knife cut away from those cuts. Porterhouses, the ones in the middle are good because in one direction you end up with more butt tender where the tenderloin sticks back towards the round, and then as you get further forward into the loin, you're just getting that longissimus muscle and you're not getting the psoas muscle, so those are T-bones. These are all a knife cut away from those, from the short loin itself. So that's a good kind of example of cuts don't just become tough as they sort of slowly change as they work their way through the back of the animal. So what we're going to do with this is show you how you kind of turn a blob of, it's kind of hard to really even tell what's front, what's back, what's up, down, right?
Leigh, sorry to interrupt. Can we just, on the back of your stapled sheet, there's a picture of the whole cow, so you can see where this is actually coming from. Sorry, so when Leigh's speaking of the round, can we kind of turn it?
So this is where it's separated from the hind leg from the round.
The round is this.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that. We've got a big steamship back here. We can kind of see where this gets separated and then it turns into that essentially. So there's a few bones in here. The last of the spinal column is attached, the H bone. We're going to go ahead and flick out our little.
So the H-bone is this really funny word. It's not H like the letter H, it's AITCH, which is sort of a term for a split pelvic girdle. So when we're looking at that, you're talking about kind of the hip, like the socket of the hip and part of the pelvis. It's a really funky bone, but it has to come out in order to get to all the muscles underneath. So what he's doing now is just, what are you getting under the spine?
I'm pulling out the butt tender that was attached to this.
Okay.
Some processors, some packers like to come way back in here, and they'll do that. They'll hot bone this. They'll pull that off where it's attached. That butt tender is attached to the short loin. Typically you're looking at square cuts with this. The butt tenders themselves can be marketed. I've seen those. Like a portion control, you get a deal on them. They're not essentially the same muscles. The psoas major muscle, it's one of the most tender muscles in the animal. It's flavorful here, but it has lobes that attach to it. So you kind of have to be a little bit more careful of cleaning it up, but this would be where Chateaubriand comes from. So if they are attached, we just kind of carefully peel this back. It's the same attachment to the backbone, to the spine where it leads up into the groin, and it kind of has a little pocket in here. And we just want to remove this because this is, if you have this attached, let's say you're getting this you're getting a subprimal top butt, it looks like this. You're going to be able to market this in a lot of ways as opposed to just taking the bones out and bread loafing it. You'll have a lot of different cuts that'll come out of here, and there'll be price points that will relate to the quality of those cuts and their size and their application.
Can we back up a hair
Yes.
again?
Yes.
Okay, so go through for us the difference between a primal and a subprimal. Why? What is a primal and why? And what is a subprimal and why do we cut it that way?
The primals would be like your chuck, rib, loin, round in generic terms. Those are,
That's what's on their diagram. Primal cuts. Yeah.
And so when we talk about subprimals, we're literally just taking those primals and breaking them down into their constituent parts. This is maybe a little bit more important. Some of the lingo when it comes to box beef, you'll notice that there's different terminology used typically. So you'll probably hear me. I'm on the retail side a lot, so I'll be using some retail terms. And if nobody knows what I'm talking about or starts looking at me funny, we can do some definitions on that.
Yeah, you should yell out if you
Please do.
if you need us to back up. But so one of the things that's helpful, I think, for understanding is that primals are broken up based on the animal's activity, right? So
Yeah.
the reason you have a shoulder primal that's separated from a loin primal is because an animal walking on all fours, they're using their shoulders and they're using their legs a lot. And the more a muscle is used, the more relatively tough it is, because those muscle fibers have to be very long and thin to have a constant influx of energy. They get it from the blood. The blood's flowing across those muscle fibers, bringing in all kinds of volatile fatty acids, saturated fats, all kinds of stuff. Whereas the meats in the middle here, they're not really being used a lot in a quadruped. They're used for like backing up or humping, things that don't happen too often. Now, maybe different depending on where you're at or what animal you're working with. But so those muscles only have to have energy quickly, like a quick shot of energy, and they get it from glycogen, which is a complex sugar, so from one place. And the difference really is that those muscle fibers don't have to be so thin. They can be fatter, right? So just think about it. It's easier for you to chew through a thicker muscle fiber than it is for you to chew through a bunch of thin, flattened out muscle fibers. And so that's really the difference. But the other difference is that all those volatile fatty acids, all those saturated fats coming across through the blood in those higher activity muscles, you have way more stuff translating into aroma and flavor when you go to cook those muscles. Conversely, with the lower activity muscles, you just have glycogen and some carbohydrates, so they tend to be less flavorful. So hopefully what you're gonna see through Leigh's work today is that there's really no muscle that's more valuable than another, provided you know how to prepare it properly and provided that it's butchered properly. So primals are where the carcass comes from those different activity levels into the parts, and then subprimals are where we take muscle groups from the primals to break it down even further. And this is a subprimal example. So what are you doing now?
This is pulling out this H-bone.
Okay.
And you kind of have to be aggressive with beef. The modes are a little bit bigger, the muscle groups are bigger, and they push back. So you'll kind of see me grappling this thing and pulling on it. But this will all kind of come out through the backbone here as we peel this way.
You're taking the spine off with it.
Yes.
Okay. Is this the same, Jayme, for buffalo? Like the same primals? Do you have a microphone? Can we get him a microphone?
Oops. No. Yeah, no, we're dealing pretty much with the same primals when it comes to buffalo. I think we vary in size a little bit on different things, but for the most part, the anatomy is similar, and we pull the same primals as we do on the beef.
Okay. So, and do you take, so I've seen it done a few different ways where the round is broken off at different places. Do you do it the same way? Do you take the round off with a little bit of that psoas on the back?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we're doing it
Cool.
the same way.
So Leigh, do you want to talk about the difference between the longissimus and the psoas muscle for folks who might be confused about that?
So the longissimus muscle runs all the way down each side of your back.
Backstrap.
Yeah, and it is traditionally where your pork chops come from. It's where your ribs start, where your ribeyes start. As it moves further down the animal into the carcass, you hit that 13th rib, and then boom, it becomes a strip. You keep on moving down until you hit this vertebrae here, and then that becomes top butt. So yeah, as you move your way through the carcass, things will be sort of similar in the same sense because it's still longissimus muscle back here as it is at the front, but they taste differently. They have different fiber structures, different fat content.
Based on activity, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so longissimus goes all the way from the shoulder to the top of the hip. And then he was talking about the porterhouse muscle or tenderloin. Psoas major, it's different. It's tucked up under the spine. And in us, we use it to stand up straight and tall. So if I were to eat another person, it would be very tough. But in an animal that walks around on all fours, it's very, very tender. So that's the difference between tenderloin, psoas major, and longissimus loin, which is what he pulled the end of off of the top. Now we're taking off the H-bone, some of the tail,
And the little
cutlet, a
tail,
little bit of the
yeah.
spine. And what are you left with there? What's that called? Top butt, you're calling it?
Yes, this would be a
that what you
boneless
call it?
top butt.
Is that what you call it? Buffalo top butt? Same?
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
There used to be a time in this country when box beef was like really prevalent where you could get some of these cuts to do your own custom, like beef in a box. And so you would see different sirloin cuts depending on who was customizing, who's doing the cutting. So that's where some of the terms like pin bone sirloin come from. You might have heard some of these different terms. They all come from this, essentially, this piece of meat right here. So that's with the H-bone removed. This looks like it has a piece of ball tip attached to it. So what we're going to do now is, once the bones are removed, you're going to end up with several muscle groups here that need some attention to separate. They can all be separated with seams.
We can do that now or later?
Let's just do this so we kind of have an idea. For example, okay, here's a piece of ball tip that actually is part of the knuckle. And this is a knife cut away from the knuckle, which comes off the steam round, which is quadricep muscles. It has a really simple seam, and it really likes to just kind of casually roll out of here with a little bit of pressure where you're not really doing a lot of cutting. Yes.
Leigh, where'd you learn how to butcher?
So I grew up in I'm from North Dakota originally. My folks raised cattle, Sioux County, just outside of Selfridge, North Dakota. And so I learned how to butcher out on the farm. And
It's the best way.
well, it was a way. It was pretty old school, you know. We had a big barrel, and we scalded hogs and did beef every once in a while, but a lot of hogs, some bison. But it was the day after Thanksgiving, and we all got the family together and started making sausage and everything early and finished up. We'd do 3 or 4 hogs.
Did you have like a special job as a kid? Like, or the kids always have like a...
Yeah, all the bad ones.
Yeah.
A lot of cleanup.
Cleaning intestines and stuff?
Yeah, cleaning, and then, mixing. We would spread all the sausage out on a big table and mix it by hand, and so
Nice.
all the kids would get involved with that. This little piece that was attached to the bottom that you'll see is a remaining piece of that bavette. Some people call this sirloin flat meat or just flat meat, and it is very tender, and in terms of fajitas, stir fry, anything like that, it's got a wonderful grain, and you can slice that, and it's wonderful for stir fry, fajitas, you name it. This little guy is the remainder of the ball tip. So if you ever see packs of these, some people make roast beef out of them, some people do other things with them, but they can be staked once they're cleaned out.
What were you guys eating last night, Jayme? Was that bavette from Buffalo? No? What were you eating at the banquet? Was it bavette from Buffalo, the inside skirt or flap?
Okay, cool.
Yeah, it was just a skirt.
Yeah, skirt.
Fat bone on the floor,
Cool.
got it.
Same thing.
Okay.
What about you? What did you have to do when you were at your grandparents' shop, and what was your job?
That's a little bit of that.
Mostly boning,
Boning,
That's
yeah.
top butt.
That seemed to be
skinning things?
all us kids. If you were old enough to hold a knife, then you got to bone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe like if we want more butchers in the world, we should give the kids the better jobs, right?
I think so,
At the
yeah.
outset.
My grandpa, all he would do is grind. That was his job.
Yeah.
No one else could touch the grinder but grandpa.
Wow. That's funny. You still have the grinder? Same grinder?
He still has it. I think the family has progressed a little bit where we can afford to send it to a processor
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
So not too many of us
Cool.
do it ourselves anymore. But there was a time where, it was times were tough, and we had beef, but not always money. So it was easier just to process our own.
Yeah, totally. What you doing now, Leigh?
I've got a little hunk of bone that's got to come out the back side here, or this transitions into like a harder connective tissue bone. Okay, so then that leaves us with the top butt, boneless. It's got kind of all of the things taken off in terms of any of the tip, sirloin tip, ball tip, tri-tip. They're all sort of
Little bits and pieces of other cuts.
Right. Some people call those cuts bottom sirloin. I've heard them called a lot of different things. But if you have, has everyone heard of tri-tip? Is that a common one for a lot of people in California? Have heard it, obviously. I've been selling a lot of it in the Midwest because we have like a really strong smoking culture. You know, Kansas. I'm from Kansas City area, and there's barbecue everywhere. And I'm starting to see people switch over to tri-tips and things like that because they smoke a lot quicker. They have better beef flavor in a lot of ways. And they're very manageable. They're affordable, where brisket can be unaffordable. So those are some cuts that come off the sirloin that are worth looking into. If you're taking your animals to processor, see what that cut list is and see if you're recognizing any of these things that we have, because a lot of times you just got to talk to them and they're going to be willing to help you. I guess the two main parts for this to really get to the heart of the sirloin, we're going to take the cap off. Some people call this rump cap. Rump is the British term for sirloin, so they make it nice and confusing. There's like 5 or 6 different terms for these cuts, so try to bear with me on that. If you have any questions, just shout them out. But this piece here rides right up underneath the fat side of the animal, and I kind of call it like the love handle of the critter. It's got not a lot of movement to it, but it's got a very like specific grain structure. And has anyone ever been to like Brazilian steakhouse where they come around and they carve the stuff off? They'll typically have this, and it's called picanha. Traditionally, Western style butchering, we call it culotte. And it's
So delicious.
And it's a wonderful cut. I wish there was more of them on the animal. So I'll try to get this over here so people can see.
What do you guys think about this? Good? Yeah? Is it making sense? It can be a little confusing. Parts and pieces of animals coming into more parts and pieces. The thing about tri-tip that I've found a challenge with some of my clients is processors don't necessarily know where it is all the time. So tri-tip is tensor fascia lita, so it goes from here to here to here, and you actually have to pull it before you cut the round or the leg off of the rest of the animal. So if a processor's in the business of just going ahead and chucking off the round, they'll cut the tri-tip right in half, and then they'll try to give you top butt as a tri-tip, right?
Or they'll try to give you a picanha. Or I've seen that confused as well.
So just maybe like opening up that dialogue a little bit and fostering that relationship, if that's a cut that you want to see, might take a different approach. And also being obviously respectful of the processor. Jayme can probably tell you processors have the way they do things for a reason, right? Because of labor problems. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing I would touch on, I guess, some of these little specialty cuts, like your tri-tips and things like that, if you're not a large volume, so like our primary customers are wholesale customers.
Right.
So they want to buy case lots, they want to buy things like that. So if you're not a real high volume plant, it's hard to put quantities of those specialty cuts together. So oftentimes we don't really market them that way. You know, we'll market the whole sirloin butts, or we'll market the peeled knuckles, or
Yeah.
So I mean, that's one of the challenges we face, I think, is we're not real high volume. I mean, in terms of small to medium butcher shops, I think we probably are right in the middle there somewhere. But, if you're going to put case lots of tri-tip together, you have to be slaughtering a lot of animals.
Totally.
So
Yeah.
that's from a marketing standpoint, that's something you really got to consider.
Yeah, and I think it is like so much about dialogue, right? Like there's a lot of, what I find in the supply chain is like a lot of producers being like, my processor, rah, 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 and then the processors being like, the farmers, rah, 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 rah. When there's like not as much talking in between to be like, hey, look, buddy, I'd really love to cut you some tri-tips, but it just doesn't work for my system, and
Right,
that kind of stuff.
Or somebody watches a cooking show and they see them smoking a tri-tip, and they send a beef to butcher and they think they're going to get 30 pounds of tri-tip. You know, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just lack of knowledge and
Lack
And
of
then-
knowledge.
and then-
Yeah, going into Whole Foods and seeing all the hanger steaks, like,
Yeah, right.
there's only one hanger steak on a carcass, but for some reason it's been popularized to where we already had this conversation.
we did.
What's that?
Tri-tip's kind of the same. There's only two, right? So popularizing something like that and puts a lot of pressure on processors. And wow, Leigh, you're doing lots of stuff over here.
So
What's going on?
I've separated the culotte from the top butt. This cap comes right off. And this is what you would see as the full culotte, right? This is typically, it can be roasted, but a lot of times, and like the way I would merchandise this is I would stake this out. And maybe later we'll come back to that and kind of show people how we clean it up, stake it out, and show you where the best ways to break it down are. If you're cutting steaks out of culottes, you'll get 3-ish, sometimes 3.5, depending on the size. I've found that this muscle doesn't necessarily translate to size for the rest of the animal. You know, you could end up with really small culottes just depending on the critter. So that's can be a difficult one if you want to do like run a big special on these and you want to really get a bunch of those together. But there's a lot of value in this cut. You could sell this cut. This used to be typically in a grocery store, this would be on here. You would just cross cut, you'd bread loaf this whole thing. And when you get a top butt sirloin steak from the store, you see all of the muscle groups in there. There'll be a little triangle, that's this culotte. You know, these two little kidney bean-shaped muscles, those are called mouse muscles. And we're gonna pull those off next so you can kind of see. This is getting down to the heart of the top butt sirloin here, starting to clean that up. The underside, these are these gluteus accessorius muscles, called the mouse muscles. And we'll start to pull that out, and then you'll see once we get to the heart of the sirloin, kind of how we can merchandise that.
Yeah, okay, so quick time check. It's 5 after 9, and I know you want to get into the steamship before the break, so
Is that gonna happen?
I don't know.
Okay,
Tell
we're
me.
gonna try it out.
Okay. So you're taking those muscles off
Yeah,
right now? Okay.
it's just easier to peel
I can
these.
tell this guy's a retail butcher. He wants everything to be clean and neat. He's like, I got to get it cleaned up. Can't leave it messy. So you learned to butcher on the farm, but I mean, getting retail skills and stuff like that, like how did it evolve?
So I went to high school in Mandan, North Dakota, and there's a little butcher shop there, Butcher Block Meats on Main Street. And I was a punk kid that needed a job, and I sort of knew the owner, Dan Kraft. He's still there, still doing his thing. And it was deer season, and they hired me on because I knew how to make sausage. And we were doing about 1,000 pounds of sausage, summer sausage every day, jerky. And we did it deer season, it just kept on going, I feel like. So I did that for a little while and really learned a lot of the retail side of things. Learning on venison, learning on things like that make it easier because sort of by nature you're seaming those cuts out. Game, you can really see the seams. These are the mouse muscles. And actually, as we get into this silver skin, all of this connective tissue can easily be cleaned off. And these are really tender, flavorful steaks that have a lot of applications. So we'll come back to that one as well. So we have culottes. Right, here's fine.
We sell a lot of buffalo meat.
Yeah,
and
I'll break that
elk
down
meat
more.
to Butcher
And
Block.
then that leaves us with
Nice. To
the two
plant.
main pieces of our top butt. We're going to clean this up. We're going to pull all this fat cap off, and then we're going to do a little squaring off and make sure that we're looking clean so we can start cutting some what we call baseball steaks. This I treat as two different muscles, and you can see this very pronounced seam that runs down it. And one side of it, I don't want to say is more desirable than the other, but can be marketed in a different way. And so I'll kind of show you as we go down here how it breaks down.
So for sirloin, are you cutting these? You're not cutting these value-added cuts. What are you using this for?
We're either marketing like whole sirloin butts to some of our wholesale clients, like other butcher shops.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if you guys heard me, but he mentioned he used to work at Butcher Block Meats in Mandan. We sell a lot of buffalo product to them and some elk product to them. But we're typically marketing the whole sirloin butt.
What about like if you take some of this home? Are you doing any of this at home? Like, you want to eat that?
Yeah, well, I would, but no, I'm not. I'm not really doing
Got
that
it.
right now. But we like in our retail storefront, even we're just primarily like a sirloin tip roast or a sirloin steak is kind of how we're marketing it. And again, I think a lot of it for us just comes down to volume. I mean, I don't know if the juice is worth the squeeze sometimes for us to really dive into these really value-added cuts, and then the educational process, again, teaching people what they're buying. Our typical consumer wants a sirloin steak, or they want a roast, or they want something they're familiar with. So there's a bit of a learning curve there, I think.
Yeah.
And
So about knowing your market, right? Like it might make sense to pull these value-added cuts like this, but it might not make sense, right?
Right.
What does your customer know? What can your processor do? Are you working with somebody like Leigh, who's very skilled
Right.
at pulling these mussels into their,
yeah,
steaming
like
them out?
if the client is a chef, which we sell to a lot of chefs, now they are likely taking and breaking this down further in a similar fashion and marketing it in that way through their restaurants and whatnot, which is I think good for us as an industry, because it builds that consumer knowledge,
Yeah.
and they
I
get a
think-
taste,
yeah. And talking about like money, just
Okay,
money,
cool.
money.
Sorry.
Like for producers to sell as whole as possible actually makes more sense, right? And to turn the cost of all that processing over to people like chefs or people like Leigh who can make money off of that. They have the market for it. Wow, that looks beautiful.
So this section here, we call this sirloin fillet. This is a very tender, it roasts up really well. People who do sous vide, you can make really nice, like slow roast beef out of this, like deli style. The nice thing about cuts like this is that they're tender. You can cook them medium rare, so when you slice them, you have that nice medium rare finish on your roast. This is the heart meat of the sirloin, what we call. And typically what we'll do with this, you can sell this like this. You can simply bread loaf this into steaks. What we like to do typically, because we like to be in tune with what people are wanting to order in terms of portion size. So what we like to do is split this down the middle, and then we'll cut medallions out of it. Some people call these baseball steaks.
Yeah, people like to buy little round pieces of meat.
They really
It's
do.
a thing.
And so when you can get a nice medallion, like, I have people coming into the shop and they're like, it's 2 adults and a couple little kids. And we want steak for dinner, and, the adults might want a ribeye or something like that. And kids don't really need a lot to eat, but they want something good and tender. And so you've got your sirloin medallions, which go a long way, and feeding people, if you've got a group, everybody gets their own steak kind of thing. You can wrap these in bacon just like a fillet and market them that way.
And this will be a little more affordable than like a tenderloin.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay? Something to that effect.
Okay, and you're doing the same with that side muscle too?
This side muscle, typically what we'll do is we'll put it in the case, we'll tie it.
So
it
as a
looks-
roast, yeah. okay.
As a roast, but if somebody wants to buy a little piece of that, that's not a problem. We're happy to cut this because this can be turned into medallions just as easy.
Yeah.
So as you see when we cut, for the retail side, we talked a little bit about this in a class yesterday about how you're about 95% your yield on box beef and stuff like that. You have a little bit less when you're working with kind of full primals, bone-in type stuff. You got some bone weight and everything like that. But there'll always be trim, and, depending on, it's worth sorting your trim into lean and less lean. And the leaner you can get, depending on where you live. I live in a college town. There's some health nuts there that really like that super lean stuff. And so sirloin can go into that to get your 90% roughly, along with some of the round cuts that we're going to get into. Did you want me to go ahead and clean this up while it's here? How are we doing on time?
We have like 20 minutes. So
Before the break?
before the break, so do you want to pull out the steamship and like?
Yeah, let's
get
do that
going?
before I get
Okay,
too-
great. So we're going to move to a different cut now. Everybody give Leigh a round of applause. He's working hard up here. Okay, what's this?
Okay, guys. This is steamship round. People actually do cook these whole. Typically, they'd have shank attached with a little handle, carving handle, and you can carve straight off these. We don't see these from packers very often because they don't fit in the boxes, but some people still carry them. There are a lot of little muscles that are going on here, and it's one of the most, for me, because of where I'm from in Kansas, it's one of the more difficult cuts to sell as, say, a straight round steak or just a straight roast, because people are looking for have different cooking styles, different uses, and things like that. So then we kind of get creative with this, because it's really a kind of a blank slate when it comes to large pieces of muscle that you can do a lot of things with. And Jayme has a lot of great ideas about how they use their rounds. But the first thing I'm going to do, you'll notice there's a section of bone in here, and then there's a little section of fat in here typically, depending on where it's broke. This one doesn't have it, but where this muscle lays on top of this pelvis bone here on the inside of it is a small steak. Some people call it an oyster steak or a spider steak. There's only one of those on each side as well. That should be someone's experience. They're really, really good. They've got a very interesting texture, but very deep beef flavor. Unfortunately, we don't have one on this one because of the way the break was just a little different on it. But you go through the same motion essentially. You come back on this other side of this H-bone. This is where the H-bone was separated from the sirloin. I suppose I should turn. Okay.
So you're just tracing around the bones essentially. Is that a fully flexible knife or
No,
semi-flexible?
stiff. The flex is okay for certain things, but a stiff, 6-inch stiff boning knife, you don't want too much flex when you're trying to get into joints, or you need a really stable edge for seaming, things like that. So this is a little spider steak, and we can clean that up, and you can kind of see. It has a strong grain that runs through it, kind of like the legs of a spider, which is why it's called that. Okay, and now for the rest of this H-bone.
So now you're going to take off the H-bone?
That's right.
Okay.
And there's some strong, strong tendons on this side that we need to cut through. So bear with me while I grunt a little bit.
Yeah, so speaking of strong tendons, you want to talk, Jayme, a little bit about, I'm from the East. Farms are really small in the East because of the mountains. When I come out to this country, it always blows my mind how much land there is, how much, I think it's hard for people to imagine the level of animal impact that used to be a fact on these lands, right? And that's something that you think about a lot with buffalo. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the opportunities there with not just respect to land, but also to how range reintroducing and range feeding is affecting flavorness and tender, and then also what are the challenges that we're seeing with getting buffalo back on the land, or even just getting cattle back on pasture rather than the feedlot.
Enough leverage on this table.
That's a great question.
All right.
If you dive into things deep enough, we're seeing all these new, they call them new movements like sustainable agriculture and regenerative agriculture, and those are basically concepts that indigenous people, native people taught. And I always say, it took the non-native world this long to catch on that we maybe knew what we were talking about or how we were doing things. But, just to think back to millions of buffalo and the impacts that they could have on the land and how they, naturally migratory graze and we're trying to copy that, I think, with rotational grazing patterns and things we're doing with cattle. And, I think it definitely has some effect on the plant varieties we're seeing out there. And if you're in the grass-fed business, you're going to realize that what kind of plants they're eating can greatly affect taste, tenderness. There's a lot of variables there. We're primarily doing grass-fed stuff with our buffalo, and one of the things that we do is we typically bring them in and we put them on a controlled diet for 60 to 90 days. And that's more of a quality control thing. You know, it's still a forage-based diet, but, you know, we don't have to worry about them eating wild onions and it affecting the taste of the meat. Because, you know, as a business, I think that eating experience is what sticks with people. And oftentimes it only takes one bad experience to turn them away. And, you know, buffalo meat is still kind of being reintroduced. It's becoming more mainstream, I think, than it's been ever. But there's still a lot of people, including our own tribal members, who haven't experienced that. So, you know, we want to make it the best we can.
Because of the tablecloth.
It's like striking a, like people don't know how to eat food that is just a reflection of the land, right?
Right.
Because they're so used to how everything's become standardized, everything's become,
Right.
you know, a carbon copy of everything else. But, you know, range feeding animals, grass feeding animals is like allowing them to express the land again.
Yeah.
But then, you know, it has to be cooked properly, it has to be honored, you know, all throughout the process. But that's not all your job. So you're in this really like tough spot of trying to, the way I see it, like strike that balance of creating consistency, but also trying to really honor a product that is of the land.
Right.
Yeah?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You know, you got to keep in mind that most people's experience eating beef is grain-fed feedlot beef, and it's creates a very consistent product. So when you start talking about grass-fed and it truly is, you know, they are a reflection of what they're eating. So, you know, their diet can greatly affect the taste and tenderness, and you get into things like, you know, age. We have to age them out a lot longer.
For buffalo?
Yes, for buffalo.
How long do you age a buffalo?
You know, we're typically slaughtering between
that better?
30 and 36 months. You know, and that's like a heifer. A heifer, we're trying to slaughter around 1,000 to 1,100 pounds. And the bulls, we want to get 1,200 to 1,400 pounds on them. And that seems to be a real nice, ideal size, I guess, for our portion sizes. And they seem to be at their peak, I guess. You go beyond that, and they start almost going the other direction.
And how long are you putting them on that controlled diet at the end?
Like, you know, like we try to get them on it like about 60 days at least.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Cool. Leigh, talk to us. What's going on over here?
Okay, sorry. Had to do a little work there.
No, don't be
Sweating
sorry.
it out. So this, pulling out the femur attached to the knuckle, that opens up basically, in Italian, the pork that they make culatello out of is essentially this piece here with the fiocca or the knuckle removed. So I like to take all that stuff out because then with shank attached, knuckle attached, we'll peel all that later. But then all of this kind of opens up like a book. You've got, and you try to aim for white fat and natural seams that run through here. And there's a little random little bits that like to attach around to the ends of the bones. So we just kind of clean that up until we can see what we're working with.
So now you're just seaming out like the bottom.
Bottom from the top.
So the bottom is outside and the top is inside.
That's right.
It can be a little bit confusing. But it's always helpful to remember that the bottom is flat and has the fat cap on it. The top is more like jiggly. So the top is like this part and the bottom is this part.
That's a good way to put it.
So it's cool to see butchers working this way because you see how much handwork it actually is. Just understanding where the muscles want to come apart and looking for those natural seams and really just using the knife to assist the handwork. So you want to show them which is top and which is bottom?
Yes, top is going to be this one. It's actually a little bit of the uglier kind of outside, you know, it looks like, this actually comes from the inside. Inside round, top round, it comes from the inside of the hamstring. And it's several muscles that come together as well that can be value added in all kinds of ways. Typically we'll peel this top butt here, or I'm sorry, this top round, and we'll turn this all into roast beef. And we sell that at our restaurant. But there are so many different steaks that you can actually get out of this. It's separated just slightly from the bottom by this very thin bit of white fat. So that would be your whole unpeeled top butt. Set that here for now. And then this has a heel attached still, but this is for your box beef people out there. This would be called a gooseneck. Bottom round, it has the eye of round and the flat of round. And there's a lot of value added that can get out of this. We'll pull the heel out of here and separate that out.
And you're doing the same break.
Yeah, on the rounds, yeah, we are.
Yep.
There's a sciatic nerve bundle that runs through here with some glands that we remove and throw away. Let's try to carefully cut that out. And being careful because on one side you have your eye of round, and then on the other you've got your nice flat, and you don't want to dig into them too much. You can avoid it. It's kind of fatty.
I love that fat. It's made me hungry. So you're taking the heel off, but leaving the eye on? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. Talk to me about eye of round, Jayme.
Well, honestly, we typically go value added with our eyes around on the buffalo. We're making jerky out of it.
Making jerky out of it. Yeah, eye of round gets a really bad rap because it's not, it's tougher, doesn't have a ton of flavor. But people are doing really creative things with it.
It's a great cut for jerky.
I think it's
though.
great.
Yeah.
That's what they make beef brazil out of. So it's a standard muscle for dry cured, delicious dry cured meat. What do you use it for, Leigh?
Eye of round, we can use it for a few options. It's honestly, in my opinion, not the greatest cut of meat in the world, but it has a few things going for it. Texture-wise, if you like beef texture, this has got it. They tie up into roast really nice, and some people really like that presentation, so they're a quick roast. I'm going to try to get in here and peel some of this off so we can separate the two. That is gristle. And again, the eye of round will be a distinctive fat cap, cylindrical, tougher cut of meat, not the most flavorful cut of meat, but can be utilized in a lot of different ways. Obviously, salumi and things like that, curing.
So when we come back after the break, I think Leigh's going to actually talk more about these muscles and what they're used for, how he sells them. We're going to talk about how value can be added to them or how they can be preserved. But for now, just breaking them out into the individual muscle groups.
So your eye of round, your flat, this is your heel, and then the knuckle, which is on the shank, which will pull all of this off here quickly. And cool.
You're really handling this. Good job.
Breaking a sweat over here.
Yeah, man,
Sorry.
you're doing great.
Apologize.
20 minutes ago, you weren't sure if this was going to happen, and you're just busting it out.
I might as well take all this off later.
And so in your shop, do you just make stock with your bones? Do you sell the bones to people?
I sell some bones, but with our restaurant, we make so many soups and gravies and things that we always start with stock.
Nice.
And we're kind of an oddball retail. We sell expensive ground beef. We don't sell bones. It's kind of a little bit different than your traditional retail setup. But, for our demographic, where we're at in Kansas, it makes the most sense.
Yeah, when I have my shop, people always wanted these marrow bones here. Mm-hmm. And they didn't want pelvic girdles or shoulder blades.
Right.
Which they're all good. They're all full of collagen and deliciousness. What do you guys do with your bones? You got a lot of bones.
We typically, what we can, we cut into dog bones, and they sell as fast as we can cut them.
Nice.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Oh, look at that kneecap. You guys see the kneecap there?
Yeah, these are what you would collect typically if you were speed boning. Collect those to see how many quarters you did. And then there's going to be shank meat. We're not doing a saw today, so sometimes you can cross saw these. That's your typical application on a lot of these. We're going to pull the meat off from them since this is getting donated. How are we on time?
You got 4 minutes. You're going to get there. I think we can go back to it afterwards, you know? Get it all laid out. What do you guys think about this? Good? Yeah?
They
All right,
look
so-
hungry. Looks like it's making them hungry.
Go ahead.
Looks like it's making them hungry, I think.
Making me hungry. So we'll pull this shank meat and then we'll break. Sounds like, yeah?
Cool.
Yeah. 5-minute break? I don't know.
Let's take a 5-minute break, I think.
Okay.
Everybody can get some coffees and water.
Yay, good
Little bone
job.
for the dog. Up in North Dakota, we just sold bones to dogs. It's not something that I do in Kansas, but it was a big part of the business. I feel like the way people feed their dogs these days, you probably get some pretty good money out of them.
Yes.
One thing about some of this stuff that I'm trimming off from the shank meat, there's some really strong tendons that run through here. And some of this connective tissue is obviously full of gelatin when it's rendered. So you don't want this going into sausage. You'll end up with gelatin pockets. And I think a lot of people think, oh, you know, you trim everything off, you scrape everything, and then that goes into the grind. And the reality is to have good grind, you really need to sort it really well.
Yeah, I put that stuff in my stock. Yay, give Leigh a hand, everybody. Good work. So we got 5 minutes to break, and then we'll be back.